I'm your host, Joyce Hochsprung. Welcome to In the Garden. Today I have with me two of my Master Gardener colleagues, Tanya Vosek and Debbie Kaharski. And so that I don't have to just talk to myself the whole time, they're going to help me out. And today we're going to do a little episode called Cultivating Conversations, and we're going to be talking about how to read the seed packets and help you plan your garden, and even ordering plants online, live plants.
Here's a big question. When should I be buying my seeds?
I like to buy them early because whether it's in the store or the catalogs, they sell out of some that are very popular. And if you wait, you're going to be left with what's left, because it's not something they can restock until the next crop has grown and they've collected the seeds from them. So I usually do my ordering in January. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, January or
January.
February.
Yeah.
I kind of have a deadline, like it's my Valentine's Day gift for myself. It's kind of like, I gotta have my order in by Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm. So again, you're gonna check the maturity dates. How long does it take? Are you gonna have to start them inside? Some things like peppers have, in Minnesota, it's that short growing season. So you usually start them in, about 8 to 10 weeks, 8 weeks before you're going to plant them outside. So look at that and look at the maturity date. How long does it need? Peppers are 8 to 10 indoors. Mm-hmm. And then counting back, so when do you start them? If you need 8 to 10 days, 8 to 10 weeks indoors, you're going to start between mid-March and April 1st, roughly. And I have found if you're doing hot peppers, I usually start on the earlier side. They seem to take longer to germinate and they're slower to get going. Maybe they know what it's like outside.
And all that information should be on your seed packet. This one says, start 8 to 10 weeks before last frost. Tells you how deep to plant them, the temperature of your soil, and how to space them when you plant them. Outside,
so we've got a lot of valuable information in the catalogs and on your packets, so make sure you check those things. Okay, what else are we looking at?
I would also add that there's a lot of online resources too. There's online calculators you can source, or you can just do your manual math by, taking your calendar and, like Joyce said, just counting backwards. So. And Johnny Seeds has a free online calculator. You put in your zip code, and then it'll tell you when to start those seeds. So just as a resource.
Every year somewhere, either on Facebook or some other social media site, I'll see people saying, oh, I planted my beans inside and now they're so leggy. And I'm like, well, yeah, beans really do better if you direct sow them. That means plant them directly in the ground, whether it's in your raised bed or your pot or your in-ground garden. Some things just do better that way. Mm-hmm. There are things like your eggplant, your peppers, your tomatoes. Those I always start inside. If you're growing onions from seed, you want to start those inside. And I'm kind of lazy on that one, so I just order seedlings from a place and have them delivered to me, and they'll come in a bundle, and I just plunk them in the ground. Mm-hmm. So, but if you want to try it, you certainly can, but you'd probably want them to have them going already. Okay, winter sowing. I just did some winter sowing a couple days ago. I bought some seed for some native plants, and they need a 60-day cold stratification period. And the stratification just means some need warm, moist, some need cold, moist. It varies, and that information will usually be either in the catalogs or on the seed packet. Because these particular ones needed a 60-day one, I took my milk jugs and cut them. I should have brought one, forgot to do that, but cut just under the handle, the gallon jug. Leave the handle attached so you have a little hinge. and then poke holes in the bottom. Fill it with, I like to put in a minimum of 3 inches of potting soil, not seed starting mix, but potting soil for this. Make sure it's moist. I usually water it and set it aside for a few minutes so any excess is drained out. And then sprinkled my seeds in, and all of the ones that I was doing, the natives I was doing, were fine seeds that you sow that need light to germinate, so they need to be surface sowed. That means you don't cover them. You just sprinkle them on top and kind of firm them down so they're making contact with the soil. And then I close up the jug, leave the cap off, and it's sitting outside where it gets about 3/4 days sun. And I basically, unless we go with absolutely no snow for the rest of this winter, I won't even look at them until April sometime, because that's when they might start germinating. And at that point, you have a little more work because you have to keep an eye on them. Make sure the seedlings, once they germinate, don't overheat. So usually you can either tape them shut with like duct tape, works pretty well. Or I have also used, and that's what I did this year, is I punched holes in the top part and the bottom part across from each other, and then I just took a twisty tie and looped it through, because I don't like taking off all that tape in the spring when I have to open them. So this way I can just undo that, and I just put a couple small strips of tape where I had gaps. So that's a great way for, especially for natives and things that need a chill period. If you want to do your tomatoes and some of those things, I know there are people who do it. You're not going to get a head start on the season. What you're going to get is plants that are already hardened off. So, and I'm going to try it this year. Don't know how it will go, but Burpee has come up with a tomato seed, and I think there were a couple of, let's see here. Is this this? Yes. And I think there were a couple of peppers too that you can, or supposedly you can sow outside when you plant your regular stuff and get a crop that you're supposed to be producing in about 70 days. I'm going to try it. We'll see. We'll report back at some point. But this one is called Garden Sown Groundswell Hybrid Tomato. So stay tuned. I'll let you know if it works.
Okay. We'll be waiting for an update.
Yes.
All right. So I have my seeds. I'm ready to sow them. What about your heat mat? I hear a lot about I need to put them on a heat mat in order to get them up to that temperature. Is that true?
It helps. It's going to speed up your germination. Some people will do it on top of the refrigerator. That's a warm spot. Or if you have a radiator, that's a warm spot. You can do it there too, but if not, a heat mat definitely helps. A small one that fits under a standard tray is about $20, I think, probably.
I would think, yes.
Okay.
And they do help. Gives a nice consistent heat. And I always like to put a dome, a clear plastic dome over it too. It keeps the humidity in there. And there are vents usually on top, so you can open it up and control the humidity a little.
Okay. What about light? Can I just do natural light, or do I need a grow light?
Once they're up, I don't put mine under a light for germination. Even ones that need light, I just have them close enough to a window that they're getting some light. But once they germinate, yeah, Minnesota just doesn't have, I mean, I see people trying to grow them on a windowsill, and they usually end up with leggy, weak, spindly seedlings. So, and it doesn't have to be a fancy light setup. A fluorescent light will do it, or an LED. You just want at least a 5,000 K so you get a good amount of light
And you want to keep that light as close to your transplant as possible.
without touching.
Yes,
You don't want to
you don't
burn
want to
them.
burn the plants, but
So
yeah.
kind of depending on how much light your particular, or how much heat your bulbs give off, you may have to adjust the height a little bit. In my grow setup in my basement, I have chains hanging from the ceiling. I do not have a fancy finished basement. So I have lightweight chains hanging down. And then your light fixtures usually have chains and S-hooks, and I just move them up and down the chains to keep them above that. But yeah, if you're going to probably want lights if you're going to do it seriously. Now there are a few things, like I start dichondra, which is a annual plant, kind of a ground cover vining thing that I use in a lot of my containers. I use a lot of that, so I start mine from seed. And I have found that once I get them where they're really starting to grow and vine a little bit, I can put those next to a south window and they'll be fine, because they'll take a fair amount of shade too. They won't grow quite as fast, but they'll be okay.
Okay. Now, okay, I started my seeds. They're starting to come. I have my light. Do I water them from the top or do I water them from the bottom? Do I mist from the top? Do I put water from the trays? How do I keep these going?
They're pretty delicate, so you don't want to flood them. So the best way is to water them from the bottom. Water it from the bottom, let it sit for 15, 20 minutes, and then take them out and drain it. So you
drain off any excess water that wasn't taken up. When I transplant my seedlings, I usually transplant like my tomatoes, my petunias, my tomatoes into the deeper 4-inch pots, my petunias into the shallower 4-inch pots. Okay. When I transplant, I will water from the top that one time, just so I can settle the soil around the roots, because I don't want air pockets in there. After that, like they said, I do bottom watering.
Okay.
Pour water into the tray under the, whatever you're growing in, whether it's pots or transplant trays, and then just let it take them up. When they, after about 15 minutes or so, if there's still water in the tray, lift them out, pour the water off.
You want them to be moist.
Yeah,
But
not soggy.
Yes.
Moist.
That's, soggy seedlings is a good way to get damping off disease, which they basically look like they just rotted off at the soil line.
Okay.
So clean containers when you're planting, make sure they're clean, because those little seedlings, anything can hit them, So.
And sometimes to help with that, to put a fan in there, it makes your plant stronger. It provides air circulation, which also keeps away some of those diseases.
Yeah, I have a fan on a timer that goes for about 6 to 7 hours a day. Could go more, but the timer on my, I have a timer right on the fan, so I just set that one. The max is, I think, 7 hours I can get out of it, so that's usually what I set it for.
Okay. So my plants are growing. I'm getting anxious. What does it mean when I need to get them ready for the outdoors? What does the hardening off mean?
Yeah, we call that hardening off, and that just means that, if your plants have been growing inside, they haven't had to deal with direct sun or that wind that we seem to get so much of here.
They're very babied.
They're very tender, and they've been pampered. So now you've got to start toughening them up. And you do that by setting them outside gradually. A lot of times in the spring we get these days where we have 40-mile-an-hour winds. I wouldn't put them out for their first time on one of those days. Wait for a relatively calm day, set them out. I like to start mine in mostly shade for the first 2 or 3 times, and then I will take them and put them out for maybe an hour the first day, then bring them back in, and then maybe 2 hours the second day. Then by about the third day, I'm going to give them maybe 3 hours, depending on the weather again, and a little more sun. And like I said, you have to really keep an eye on the weather.
Okay.
How much wind, how hot is it, and move them accordingly. And by the end of a week, you keep doing this for about a week to 10 days, and if you're lucky and you can get them out every day because you don't have those 40-mile-an-hour winds, you can usually do it in about a week. But if you have to interrupt it at times, it might take you 10 days. So do that, and then they're acclimated to being outdoors.
Okay. Now, what if this just sounds so overwhelming. Can't I just go and buy live plants?
Sure you can.
Okay.
Absolutely. You can go, practically every nursery is going to carry vegetable starts, perennials and annuals, and you can certainly go and buy them.
Is there anything I need to watch for when I'm buying live plants?
Well, just check them over, make sure they appear healthy.
Okay.
Look for, sturdy stems, good color. Make sure there's no little insect pests sitting on them. Check under the leaves and just look them over.
What if I buy them online?
You can do that too. And I have bought a lot of perennials online because I like varieties maybe that I can't find locally. But I always check the local nurseries' websites. They almost all now have a website. So check their website. It's usually up somewhere in January or February. See if it's on their list. And if you call them early enough, sometimes they can special order it for you, even if they weren't planning to carry it. So I always do that first.
Okay.
But sometimes with newly released plants, they can't get them the first year, but some of the bigger online retailers can. And so if you really have your heart set on it, you're probably going to have to order it online. And that's okay. Understand that your plant may be a little bit smaller than if you bought it at a nursery in a gallon-sized pot. But usually most of them will have a pretty good root system. Most of these growers that have been doing this have been doing it for quite a long time, and they've pretty much figured out how to do it and get them shipped pretty well. I have bought some things online that by the end of the season have caught up with nursery grown plants of a similar type. So it just depends on what you're looking at.
You might want to check out what their warranty policy is too.
Yes, if they have, many of the nurseries and sometimes online ones, it depends, will have a warranty for like the first year, or depending on if it's an annual or a perennial,
Okay.
or a shrub or whatever. In the nursery, you're going to have, they can only afford to carry so many varieties. They have to keep in mind their inventory, what can they sell. So like I said, there are trade-offs. If you order online, you're going to find more of the newer plants out there. But they're probably going to be a little bit smaller that first season. So, and you ask, what are the good online retailers? It's going to take a little homework on your part until you start getting comfortable with some. Do your homework, read reviews, talk to other gardeners. There's a site called Dave's Garden Watchdog, and I know I've talked about this before. You can go there, and there are literally thousands of online sellers for just about any plant you can imagine listed, and people have the opportunity. You can go in there and give your review of what condition was the plant in when it arrived. Was it, did it meet expectations? Did it die? Did it arrive dead because it got caught up in the mail somewhere? And how was the nursery about replacing it? Now, most of the ones I've dealt with, and I've only had, I think, twice in 20-some years where I had to replace a plant. And I took a picture of it and sent it to them, and they said, oh, yeah, we'll ship you a new one. So check the reviews, do your homework, and you'll be fine.
And many of these seed catalogs also offer plants.
Yes. And there again, if you're unsure, check that Dave's Garden Watchdog site, because that's great. If I'm ordering something specialized, like a lily or a daylily, because I can't find it locally, and this is one I really, really want, so understand that things like daylilies and lilies, by the time they show up in the nurseries, are probably going to be have been around for probably anywhere from 10 to 20 years in some cases. Because when somebody develops a new plant, it takes time to grow enough to meet the demand. So a lot of times, for daylilies, for example, starting out, probably only the person who bred the plant, is going to have it available, and it will be in a limited quantity, and it will be more expensive when it's newer. So you can find some great plants at lower prices, but probably not the very newest ones. Okay, this is a daylily called Handwriting on the Wall. It's bred by Carol Emmerich near Jordan, Minnesota. And when I'm buying daylilies, I like to buy from breeders who are breeding in Minnesota or Wisconsin, the Dakotas, Maine, places that have a similar climate to ours. I don't want to buy ones that are coming from Florida, because odds are they're going to be an evergreen plant, which means that anytime it warms up, they're going to try to start growing. And when they get, and you know they're going to get whacked by another freeze or sub-zero temperatures, they're not going to do real well. They're going to kind of peter out, because it takes energy to do that. So, you know, down south it might happen once, and it's like, well, okay, we'll come back from that. You know, if it's up here and it happens, it's going to probably be toast. So I like to stick with ones that are semi-evergreen, which basically in Minnesota, at least right now, until our climate changes more, semi-evergreens and dormants are pretty much all dormant here. It's just the way it is. They're going to die back to the ground and not start growing again. You know, if we get a week of 50 degrees, they're going to go, no, I don't think so. I'm just going to wait. Whereas some of them are going to, an evergreen would look at that and go, oh, yay. So I try to stay away from the evergreens on those. Now this one, I think actually, it's listed as semi-evergreen. Tells you, it's going to tell you what time in the season it's going to bloom. Is it going to bloom mid-season in the daylily season, early, late, very late? Are the flowers fragrant? It's going to tell you what's the foliage like. And it's going to tell you if it's a tetraploid or a diploid. And diploid just means it has the normal number of chromosomes. Tetraploid means it has double that number. So, and both are great daylilies. Tetraploid is usually going to have, the flower petals are going to be a little thicker, maybe a little sturdier. The scapes are usually thicker and a little heavier. And sometimes the leaves are larger, not always, but sometimes. So that's just one example. Same with, like, if you're looking at lilies or phlox, or check the zone. We're zone 4B. So you want to keep that in mind. One thing I want to mention about daylilies, if it says reblooming, for sure, and that's why you're looking at buying it, for sure check where it was hybridized. Who bred it? Where do they live? Where did they hybridize it? Because reblooming in southern Iowa is a whole different thing than reblooming in Minnesota. A lot of daylilies will rebloom in zone 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, almost everything will. But you get up into zone 4, and same with like reblooming iris. Yeah, maybe on a good year. Immortality is a white one that is probably the most consistent reblooming iris. So do a little research. Just because it reblooms somewhere doesn't mean it's going to rebloom here. Okay, did we miss anything?
What does the new mean? You know, like catalogs sometimes have new.
Yeah.
And like you said, you have new with
nurseries or catalogs, they'll say new.
New. Oh, new. What
and
does
you
that
think,
mean?
oh, new plant. Well, that it might mean it's new to the nursery trade and was just released, or it might mean that it's just new to them this year. Whether it's catalog or nursery. So if that's your reason for buying it, look it up first to be sure it's really new. A couple of years ago in nursery, I saw a Baptisia plant that was labeled new. And I looked at it and I looked at the variety and I go, I've been growing that one for 20 years. So it's not necessarily new to the trade is what I'm trying to say. So we hope if you have any garden questions that you'll reach out to one of us.
Reach out to one of us or
any of the other master gardeners. And we're going to give a shameless plug here for our Garden Magic coming up on, is it April 22nd, I believe?
April 22nd, yes.
And we will have Julie Weisenhorn from the U of M talking about foodscaping, and Denise Helderan is going to be talking about lilies. So we hope you'll join us. We'll be having information out on social media, and if you've ever gone before, you'll get an email about it. So that will be coming out in the near future. So we'll see you later in the garden.
Yep, thank you.